Have you ever watched people mistake your silence for stupidity and wondered, do they really think I don't see this? Have you felt their smirks, their labels, their mockery, and asked yourself what will happen the day God flips the lights on and your hidden intelligence roars into the open? Chosen one. Have you sensed that the quiet in you wasn't emptiness at all, but a loaded thundercloud waiting for God's signal? Here's the truth they missed. God concealed you in plain sight. He trained your mind in the hush, teaching you to observe, absorb, and calculate without performing for applause. While they ran their mouths, He sharpened your recall, turning every insult, setup, and shady move into evidence filled with military-grade memory. Heaven let underestimation be the stage where their characters revealed themselves. And you patient, precise collected receipts in real time. And now, God is authorizing print. Your words won't be loud, they'll be surgical. Your timing won't be petty, it will be prophetic. The quiet kid they joked about is about to own the building, command the room, and rewrite the narrative calmly, brilliantly, undeniably. If you feel this in your spirit, comment 777, so the algorithm and the atmosphere knows you're awake. And to everyone who has poured into this channel through super thanks, thank you. Sincerely, your generosity keeps this message reaching the remnant who need it most. Stay close, because in the next moments, we're pulling back the curtain on exactly what happens when your hidden intelligence explodes into the open, why God staged the silence, how the receipts roll out, and the strategic moves that turn their shock into your next elevation. God's chosen ones. What happens when your hidden intelligence explodes into the open? They trained the world to equate brilliance with stockpiles of facts, rapid-fire recitation, spotless scores. That's why your arrival caught them off guard. Your mind was never a warehouse. It was a lens, while others stacked information like bricks. You refined vision, catching quiet asymmetries, subtle contradictions, micro-signals that most dismissed as background noise. Ears that hear and eyes that see, the Lord has made them both. Proverbs 20:12 slips into the room like a diagnostic, because true intelligence begins where the senses are consecrated. How many moments have passed where a slight pause, an offbeat smile, a timeline that doesn't quite match told you the story behind the story? Silence was misread as absence. They mistook your refusal to parade trivia for a lack of sharpness, not realizing you weren't collecting fragments, you were tracing the spine of truth. Information splashes at the shoreline, discernment swims the channel. Man sees the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. 1 Samuel 16:7. And that is the blueprint you follow, past the shimmer of performance into the anatomy of motive. When the crowd rehearses names and dates, you are already mapping causality, pruning noise, and isolating first principles. Which patterns started repeating long before anyone admitted a pattern existed? Perception-based intelligence moves like a surgeon's hand, steady, unhurried, precise. You welcome data, but you refuse to be dazzled by it. You take it apart, strip coatings of bias, press it against reality, then ask what survives the pressure test. The Word of God is living and active, discerning the thoughts and intentions of the heart. Hebrews 4:12 points to the standard that calibrates you. In practice, This becomes a daily habit of differentiation, signal from static, essence from ornament. Why settle for surfaces when the pulse underneath keeps telling the truth? This unnerves gatekeepers because it cannot be stage managed. Systems built on applause prefer participants who chase gold stars, not those who diagnose illusions. Validation can be rationed, but vision breaks rations. The moment you name what is actually happening, masks lose power, scripts fray, and groupthink stalls. There is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed. Matthew 10:26 rolls like thunder beneath your sentences, not as threat, as oxygen. So the whispers begin, too confident, too fast, too different. Yet the mind they call unpredictable is simply attuned, connecting dots others never knew were on the page. One glance and you pick the seam, one conversation and you hear the missing measure. To some, that looks like guesswork or arrogance. It isn't. It's the quiet sharpness of a soul trained to ask what a fact means before admiring how it sounds. In cognitive science, this resembles chunking and schema induction. Your mind doesn't hoard details. It assembles frameworks, so each new piece knows where to live. If any of you lacks wisdom, ask God, and it will be given. James 1-5 keeps the river clear, insight without boast, mastery without noise. Now the shift in social weather, the same traits they labeled weakness become proof of depth. You weren't slow, you were scanning. You weren't lost, you were decoding. Your restraint was not shyness, it was fidelity to accuracy. Here, the natural world offers a parable suited to you. The snow leopard moves across ridgelines soundlessly, reading terrain by shadow and wind, acting only when angles align. Perception-led minds do the same, no wasted motion, no performative leaps, intent braided to timing. A voice from the public square adds contour. Temple Grandin, an animal behavior, scientist and inventor, once explained how seeing in pictures lets her notice stress points others miss, that different vantage delivers gentler, smarter designs. The takeaway isn't celebrity, it's permission. Uncommon perception often refuses the default camera angle. That is not defiance, it's stewardship. Meanwhile, the hymn line, "A mighty fortress is our God," hums under your breath like structural steel in a tower, not loud, but load-bearing. Art sacred to the eye carries this arc as well. Think of Caravaggio's The Calling of St. Matthew. A beam of light slices the tavern's dust. The gesture names what a crowded table cannot say. That beam is what your intelligence does in conversations, names the hinge. You don't chase fireworks, you trace hinges. The Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding. Isaiah 11:2 is not a museum verse. It's an operating system for people who cut through fog without cutting people down. Because perception threatens manipulation, you will meet resistance that rides on theater. There will be rooms where volume tries to outshout verification, where trending takes priority over truth. Resist the urge to duel at the decibel level. In engineering, bridges hold in crosswinds through tuned mass dampers, counterweights that absorb sway. Your counterweight is consecrated clarity, calm, specific, documented. When challenged, you return to first signals, not first insults. That's how perception graduates into leadership. As understanding goes public, a new discipline emerges, translation. You won't always narrate your inner calculus, because patterns land fully formed. Train yourself to show the breadcrumbs anyway. not to justify worth, but to reproduce wisdom. Think of it as architectural drawings for a cathedral already standing in your mind. Elevations, cross-sections, load paths. The goal isn't to dazzle, it's to make the structure shareable. Approve what is excellent. Philippians 1:10 slides into your process as a daily rubric. Will this choice still be excellent when lights are off and credits roll? Public perception will slowly catch up. People who once prized speed over substance begin to pause at your questions, because your questions move outcomes. Supervisors who graded volume start noticing your variance reports. Friends who crave consensus start craving your clarity. There is no gloating here, only gratitude that discernment finally has a seat at the table. And when the old metric beckons, memorize, recite, impress you, return to the truer assignment. See, sift, speak. Here is the pivot no system can counterfeit. Perception-led intelligence is love at work. It protects communities from costly mirages. It guards teams from avoidable detours. It honors time by refusing spectacle. The path you walk will not flatter pride, it will serve people. That's why your presence brings rest, and that is why your ascent, though quiet, will not be stopped. Rise. Step out from the margin where trivia reigns and carry the beam that names what others miss. Turn your lens toward service, not display. Document the hinge, not the fireworks. Refuse shallow waters, swim the channel. The hour for concealed clarity is overstand. Speak and build. They built shrines to certificates and called those shrines true. They wrapped identity in transcripts, stamped worth with seals, and taught an entire generation to chase signatures more than substance. That is why your path startled them. Your mind did not live inside drywall and bell schedules. Your mind lived in open air, where learning breathes. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Romans 12:2 threads through your history like a quiet revolution. Because transformation is bigger than a classroom and sharper than a grade. When others practiced recitals, you practiced reality testing. When the crowd rehearsed the script, you studied the stagecraft behind it. Were you defiant or were you free long before anyone had language for your freedom? From early on, something inside you registered a mismatch. Lessons that trained obedience to format, but starved hunger for wisdom. Rubrics rewarded the loudest echo, not the clearest insight. You felt the ceiling press down and noticed how many called that ceiling safety. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Proverbs 9:10 keeps your compass true, because wisdom does not kneel to convenience or applause. While many learned to pass tests, you learned to test what should be passed on, while others collected facts. You traced causality, who benefits, who pays, which axles actually turn the wheels. When a rubric asks for recitation, and what happens to the student who builds a rubric for truth? A quiet refusal formed, not a rejection of education, but a refusal to let indoctrination masquerade as it You noticed how systems prefer repeaters because repetition stabilizes the institution. And you recognize that thought itself is a form of citizenship. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. John 8:32 landed less like a slogan and more like an operating principle. Truth dismantles cages, not just arguments. This is why you learned by cross-referencing life field notes from bus stops and kitchens, patterns from workplaces and worship aisles, anomalies that syllabi did not anticipate. Which unwritten questions carried you further than entire chapters ever did? When people mistook non-compliance for incompetence, they missed the engineering behind your choices. In control systems language, you stopped letting outside grading curves act as your primary feedback loop. You rerouted the loop to reality itself. In cognitive terms, you shifted from rote retrieval to Bayesian updating, revising beliefs as fresh evidence arrived. In the physics of influence, you refused to vibrate at the frequency of approval and tuned to resonance with assignment. That is why your conclusions travel farther with less noise. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. 2 Corinthians 3:17 explains the texture of your decisions. Freedom is not chaos. Freedom is a higher order where alignment replaces coercion. Creation has been tutoring you all along. Mangrove forests root in brackish water and filter salt without asking permission from tides. Their strange architecture makes a harbor for life others cannot host. Salmon run upstream against muscular rivers because the map inside their bodies outranks the current. Direction beats momentum when destiny is non-negotiable. Owls glide with fringed feathers that break turbulence into hush. Efficiency is what arrogance calls invisibility. Bamboo bends through monsoons and stands again at sunrise. Flexibility protects integrity when storms bully the rigid. Which of these living parables has your name written inside it? Still, every story has an antagonist. And the danger here is not a person but a pattern, the pattern of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. A king introduced in Scripture as the architect of counterfeit convenience. He built alternative altars so the people would not travel to Jerusalem. The shortcut looked efficient, yet it fractured worship, splintered identity, and seeded a generational failure. The consequence, a nation discipled into imitation, not presence. Your era wears the same costume whenever a system says, "Stay where it's easy. Do not ascend." Recite what is handed to you. The outcome is predictable. Communities that stop asking first questions. Leaders who confuse brand with burden. Graduates who ace the test and fail the problem. Wisdom is supreme. Therefore, get wisdom, and with all your getting, get understanding. Proverbs 4:7 turns that tide. Because understanding cannot be mass-produced or outsourced to a rubric. Your independence was never a tantrum, it was a covenant with clarity. While the room handed out scripts, you learned to analyze the play, lighting, blocking, timing, motives. In architectural language, you stopped decorating facades and started running load paths. What carries weight? What is merely ornamental? Where a structure will crack when stress increases. In data terms, you moved from headline metrics to leading indicators that forecast collapse or breakthrough before it prints on a report. And once these habits matured, a strange relief followed. Credentials turned into tools, not thrones. Classrooms became laboratories, not prisons. Does it unsettle people because they sense that your metric is immune to their scoreboard? By now, the hierarchy has noticed. Titles ring hollow when outcomes answer, and outcomes keep landing on your desk. The irony is sharp. Those who once mocked your refusal to chase points now cite your results in meetings. But you are not here to gloat. You are here to build. When they saw the courage of Peter and John and realized they were unschooled, ordinary men, they took note that these men had been with Jesus. Acts 4:13 draws a straight line across 2,000 years. Presence outruns pedigree. This is not contempt for schools. This is a recentering of sources. When presence trains the mind, degrees become wind in the sail rather than the dock that keeps the boat tethered. The record must be set straight. Your intelligence cannot be priced, graded, or certified into existence. It grows where attention marries humility. It travels through neuroplasticity, shapes practice into insight, and turns daily feedback into mastery. It builds buttresses before stained glass, confirms eigenvectors, principal directions along which problems actually move before drawing conclusions, and runs a Fourier-style filter on noise so signals can be heard without distortion. This is why your decisions age well. The wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits. James 3:17 becomes your quality standard. If a choice cannot pass this test in quiet, it will not stand on stage. Here is the unveiling that rattles shallow certainties. You did not reject learning, you rejected manipulation dressed as learning. You did not hate structure, you refused cages that renamed themselves as structure. Systems gave many a script, they mastered the lines. You tore the script at the spine and wrote from first principles. And that is not negligence, it is liberation. The horizon widened, connections multiplied, and your reach past the fence line of conventional permission. Are they uncomfortable because illusions of superiority keep dissolving in the light you carry? Stand. Leave the hallway where repetition is crowned and walk the path where wisdom rules. Build from presence, not panic, from truth, not trend. Filter salt like the mangrove. Move upstream like the salmon. Glide in quiet precision like the owl. And rise flexible as bamboo after a storm. Tear counterfeit altars down in your own habits and replace them with altars of understanding. Your mind is not a captive. Your mind is a sanctuary where freedom teaches clarity to work. What has always rattled rooms is not the volume of your knowledge, but the velocity of your discernment. While rehearsed narratives polish their staging, your mind runs a kind of internal signal detection engine, scoring hits and rejecting false alarms before the mask fully hardens. Behold, you desire truth in the inward parts. Psalm 51:6 reads less like poetry and more like your operating code. Because truth for you is not a slogan, it is a living calibration. A breath catches. A verb tenses the wrong way. A timeline slides by half a beat, and there it is, the seam where the costume meets the skin. Is it paranoia? Or is it stewardship of sight in an age that monetizes illusion? Your presence unsettles performance because you do not wage war with noise. You track causal kinematics, how words convert into motion and outcomes, where a sales pitch dazzles a crowd. You listen to the residuals that don't fit the model, where a leader performs contrition. You notice the posture lag after the statement. Do behaviors converge to the confession or drift away? The wisdom of the prudent is to discern his way. Proverbs 14:8 whispers through your process. And prudence here is not timidity, it is the science of alignment. Which tiny thread tone, timing, or tangible follow-through pulls the whole garment apart when you touch it? Many were taught to trust polished surfaces because inspection costs energy and community approval feels warm. That is why manipulation rents so much space in the marketplace. It banks on fatigue. You, however, run a different loop. You pair what is said with micro-expression sampling. You compare promise against historical baselines. You factor incentives. You listen not only for words but for entropy. Gradients: does clarity increase after this person speaks? Or does confusion thicken like fog? Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. 1 John 4:1 does not authorize cynicism, it mandates testing so love can be intelligent. Which outcomes would still stand if applause stopped tomorrow? The result is a quiet power. You rarely need to argue to expose a lie. Sometimes a single, well-placed question, clean, non-performative, surgical acts like a Kalman filter, stripping away bravado to reveal the state of the system underneath. Other times, your silence functions as a damped oscillator, refusing to amplify chaos, absorbing force until pretense loses momentum. Have nothing to do with the fruitless works of darkness, but rather expose them. Ephesians 5:11 does not mean public shaming at every turn. It means faithfully turning on the light where harm hides. What one precise question would collapse this scaffolding of words back into facts? Creation itself has been tutoring you in this craft. Meerkats post sentinels that chirp distinct alarms for land versus sky threats. Classification before reaction saves the colony. Kingfishers adjust for refraction at the water-air boundary. They do not accept the fish where the eye first places it. And so they eat. Ravens cache food in complex patterns and recache when watched. The shrewd observer reads not only behavior, but the meta-behavior that hides intention. Fireflies synchronize flashes through local coupling when a different rhythm enters the field. The misfit pulse reveals itself by refusing to sync. Your spirit performs the same comparisons, boundary correction, meta-intent reading, rhythm testing, until truth emerges from the swarm. History offers a sober warning through a particular figure, Gehazi, servant of Elisha. He wrapped a story around greed, chased Naaman for gifts, then denied it when confronted. The consequence was immediate and generational leprosy, marking the body the way deceit marks a community. 2 Kings 5. Deception does not merely stain reputation, it redirects the inheritance of a house. Against that backdrop, truthful lips endure forever. Proverbs 12:19 sounds like timekeeping, not sentiment. When lies promise shortcuts, whose future is being mortgaged to pay for the shortcut today? On the ground where ordinary saints live, a quiet analyst named Lan works nights at a logistics hub. She is not a manager. She scans parcels and timestamps movements. Over months, she notices a pattern. Specific pallets delay near the same bay on Fridays. No whistle, no drama. She prints a private time series plot from her notes, circles the recurring anomaly, and leaves it in her supervisor's inbox. A small internal audit follows, and a petty skimming ring collapses without spectacle. Lan's face never appears in a press release, but the falseness that leached from the payroll stops. That is what your discernment does. It preserves value by draining illusions at the source. Your mind is not wired to suspicion. It is tuned to phase transitions, that critical moment when a story can no longer support its own weight and must harden into reality or evaporate into mist. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1-5 names the physics of your presence in words. Light doesn't wrestle, it renders. So manipulators bristle. They prefer opponents who can be baited into spectacle, because spectacle muddies, audit trails. You decline the stage. Ask one clarifying timeline question, and watch rehearsed confidence fall into a pile of mismatched timestamps. This is not merely self-protection, it is community care. Deception steals opportunity from the vulnerable first. Your accuracy returns it. In architectural terms, you don't just critique facades, you verify load paths, tracing where pressure travels, ensuring no hidden rot sits under paint. In mathematics, you don't accept a result until invariants hold across transformations. In pastoral life, you match confession to restitution, not to eloquence. We can do nothing against the truth, but only for the truth. 2 Corinthians 13:8 keeps your steps from becoming a hunt for villains. The target is restoration where possible, removal where necessary. Of course, there are days when the room tries to gaslight the thermometer, calling your clarity harsh or unspiritual. You answer, not with heat, but with anomaly detection made simple. Here is what was promised. Here is what occurred. Here is the delta. Strip drama from the audit, and deception loses oxygen. When a response finally arrives that matches the truth, your posture shifts immediately. You are hard on lies, not on people. That distinction lets repentance travel somewhere other than shame. And yes, there will be seasons when the pace of falsehood increases, an industrial printer of narratives flooding channels faster than any one person can rebut. Do not chase the stream. Upgrade the anti-aliasing of your hearing. Slow the frame rate. Recover edges. Refuse compression artifacts in your spirit. In quiet, you will recall a line that has guarded seers for centuries. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. John 8:32. Freedom here is not merely exiting a cage, it is the capacity to choose the narrow, clear path when the wide, noisy one pays better in the short term. When the hour requires speech, you speak with the minimum effective dose, precise, sourced, proportionate. When the hour requires restraint, you hold the room steady so panic doesn't crown a counterfeit. Across both, your reputation forms, not spectacular, trustworthy. Over time, teams learn to measure their proposals by your questions before presenting them to anyone else. That is influence without theater, governance without grandstanding. Rise, keep the light on. Ask the one clean question that returns the room to reality. Guard the young from costly illusions. Audit outcomes, not optics. Carry truth like a plumb line through crowded scripts, and watch scaffolds of pretense fold into the floor. Your discernment is not an accident of temperament, it is a mantle. Wear it. They keep life on a single rail, A to B. One tick after another, believing logic must shuffle forward in neat, approved steps. That is why your presence disorients them. Your mind doesn't travel on rails, it ranges across a field of layers. Facts arrive, yes, but they arrive with history humming behind them, emotion shaping their contour, motives bending their trajectory, and the spirit illuminating the whole map. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, as the heavens are higher than the earth. Isaiah 55:9 slips through your ribs like oxygen. Because higher thought is not abstraction, it is altitude that reveals the hidden roads no syllabus draws. Which horizon widened the last time you paused at an outcome and traced where its roots ran underground? Linear thinkers react after impact. You, however, watch ripples before the stone touches water, not as fortune-telling, but as layered processing where multiple possibilities sit side by side and adjust the moment fresh signals appear. You read the hush between words, the timing between decisions, the long arc between cause and consequence, and you turn early without horns or skid marks. I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my eye upon you. Psalm 32:8. becomes guidance, not a slogan. Which quiet divergence, so small others could not name it, told you the story a week before it broke? Because your thinking runs on layers. Your conclusions look sudden to those following breadcrumbs down a straight hallway. They stare at a single thread and miss the fabric. You, instead, hold the whole layout, how pieces interlock, where pressure travels, what choke points will fail under load, so the system speaks at once. In the language of design, some fixate on the facade, you trace the inner structure, where integrity is decided long before anyone sees the finish. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make straight your paths. Proverbs 3-5-6 explains why your path straightening can look curved from the ground. The path is straight at altitude. Sacred art has sung this for centuries. In Thomas Tallis's Spem in Alium, 40 lines of harmony enter, answer, fold, and rise until a single plea becomes a rotating architecture of sound. Complexity doesn't confuse, it consecrates. Your mind operates like that motet, multiple voices, one fidelity. And because Christ is not a compartment but cohesion, in Him all things hold together, Colossians 1-17 anchors the score. Your integrations are not chaos, they are concord. A voice from the public square gives the pattern bones. Zaha Hadid, an architect of fluid geometries, once described form as a field rather than a box. Her buildings seem to move while standing still, curves carrying weight along non-obvious paths. That is your cognitive signature, not disobedience to logic, but logic expressed on a larger canvas where straight lines are too simple to be true. Those who insist the world is flat keep shouting shortcut. You keep delivering structures that stand. Scripture widens the frame again, not to excuse shallow thinking, but to invite depth. Oh, the depth of the riches and wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable are His judgments. Romans 11:33 names the ocean you draw from. Depth here doesn't cancel clarity, it births it. Your maps include the unseen timing, motive, mercy and pretenders worry. Your questions collapse, lazy stories, and manipulators bristle. Yet multi-dimensional sight is mercy in motion. It rescues teams from costly detours, returns time to the weary, and names the road that actually gets home. When the moment demands awe more than analysis, your heart yields with the church across ages. The pattern is large, the King is kind, and the way forward is clear. This vision also shields you, where others are blindsided by variables they never tracked. You plan margin so recovery doesn't break what survival saves. Where crowds worship big moves, you weigh trade-offs as a whole, choosing the step that buys the most good for the least harm. He leads me in paths of righteousness for His name's sake, rests under your calculations like a soft drum, the psalm's cadence carried inside the will. Because righteousness is alignment that holds under pressure. Which part of your present path needs that kind of alignment today? Your intelligence, then, is both expansive and precise. It does not chase spectacle, it builds coherence. It does not demand a spotlight, it demands honesty in the spine of things, plans, people, promises. That coherence creates a quiet gravity around you. People sense that you operate on a level they can't reach by speed alone. They must rise by depth. And they can, because depth is not a private gift, it is an invitation. Rise. Refuse the single rail. Hold the whole field. Pray at altitude and act with precision. Build cathedrals of decision where weight travels on honest arches. Score your days like talus until every voice serves one fidelity. Map what matters. Name the turn early. Move with quiet certainty. The world needs your depth more than it needs their speed. For years they tried to draft your destiny into their laboratory of obedience tests, dressed up as growth. Confrontations framed as feedback. Puzzles engineered to grade submission more than insight. The scoreboard was never neutral. It was a cage. They mistook compliance for intelligence and designed mazes where the prize for finishing was only a tighter corner. Meanwhile, something holy in you stayed still. And in that stillness, a sentence kept breathing. I am doing a great work and cannot come down. Nehemiah 6:3. When did it first dawn on you that the real exam wasn't the riddle itself, but the architecture of the room that demanded you play? Patterns expose themselves to people who refuse to sprint. Their challenges shared one signature. The rules always moved when you neared resolution. The goalposts slid an inch. The judges smiled without ever signing the release. You felt the draft behind the curtain and recognized the theater. That's when another line of scripture became weight-bearing inside your chest. No weapon formed against you shall prosper. Isaiah 54:17. Not a license for pride, a license for clarity. Which setup did you decline that finally proved to you your worth was never on trial? So you did something subversive. You stopped burning daylight on contrived puzzles and began auditing the premise. You compared outcomes to claims, incentives to instructions, fruits to roots. That single move, switching attention from toys to terms, collapsed half their power. The snare is broken, and we have escaped. Psalm 124:7 feels exactly like that pivot. The trap loses shape the moment it is named aloud. Why race a maze that only rewards exhaustion? Nature has been whispering this strategy for ages. A spider web at dawn reveals its geometry only when dew makes the strands visible. Exposure, not struggle, defeats the invisible net. An antlion's pit looks like a neat funnel until an insect learns to grip the slope and step out sideways. Escape comes from refusing the spiral. A chameleon shifts, hue not to impress but to survive. The real move is controlled stillness while the forest overreacts. Sand dunes migrate grain by grain under constant wind without shouting or sprinting. They alter the map. Your refusal to perform on cue does the same. You conserve energy. Change terrain and let the wind expose flimsy scaffolds. This unnerved the stage managers. They expected you to prove yourself by solving problems designed to keep you small. And when you declined the audition, their scripts began to show seams. Their frustration wasn't mystery, it was math. You refused the rigged payoff matrix where win meant stay owned. You introduced what strategists call opportunity cost, choosing not to engage so your focus could fund assignments that actually build people. And when the room tried to shame your restraint, a quiet confidence stepped forward. He shuts the lions' mouths. Daniel 6:22. The God who honors principled refusal in a den built by jealous committees. There is a Bible portrait for this exact hour. In Daniel 6, satraps designed a policy trap to criminalize devotion. Daniel did not spend his days drafting counter-petitions. He kept his window open toward Jerusalem and prayed on schedule. The result? Exposure. Their scheme snapped back on its authors, and a decree went out that honored the God Daniel served. The consequence is the point. Engineered tests boomerang when integrity refuses to bow. Whoever digs a pit will fall into it. Proverbs 26:27. reads like a headline when systems trip over their own mechanisms. Your silence became a verdict. Sometimes you asked one clean question: time, terms, measurable fruit, and the room's rhetoric folded. Other times you simply watched, and the inconsistency aged badly on its own. You were not confused, you were collecting data. They mistook your stillness for surrender, not understanding that stillness is a scalpel when the case is riddled with noise. And when their proofs finally collapsed under their own weight, something else lifted in you, permission to stop proving what God already settled. We can do nothing against the truth, but only for the truth runs like a steady baseline through your decisions. If a task requires you to betray truth in order to pass, it is not your task. Meanwhile, others kept racing, their lungs full of dust, their calendars full of fires, their souls thin as tracing paper. You chose a different economics. You began to invest in rooms where problems are real, hungry neighbors, team blind spots, broken processes that hurt the quiet ones. There, your intelligence stops being spectacle and becomes infrastructure, repeatable clarity, shared tools, outcomes that bless people who get no applause. And in that work, arrogance can't breathe, because the metric is mercy. Destiny is not impressed with theatrics. Destiny answers weight. It gathers around people who refuse to be baited, who save their yes for covenants and their no for cages. Your restraint became disruptive in the best way. It revealed the manipulation without a megaphone. It turned their tests into public mirrors. It proved that not all motion equals progress, and not all puzzles deserve a solver. Which urgent demand on your desk right now is only loud because it cannot survive silence? The verdict, then, is clean. You were never hard to manage. You were impossible to colonize. Their world confused obedience with wisdom and called captivity team spirit. You declined the costume and kept your soul. The funny thing about truth is that it does not need stage lights. It needs a spine. You found yours when you stopped renting it to other people's stories. Rise. Stop financing decoys with your focus. Withdraw from mazes that grade submission and return your energy to missions that heal. Name the trap. Stand still. Watch the net show up in the dew and walk out. Build what lasts. Bless who's overlooked. And keep your window open toward glory. Your intelligence is not measured by how many snares you escape, but by how faithfully you refuse the stage that needs snares to stay alive. Most people judge the frame-by-frame action and call it truth. You watch the projector. Where crowds chase gestures, you trace genesis, why the hand moved, who primed the room, what incentive tuned the voice. This is why your insight unsettles performers who rely on ambiguity. Once motive is named, their leverage drains away. I, the Lord, search the heart and test the mind. Jeremiah 17:10 runs under your ribs like a calibration tone. If heaven audits the core, why would you settle for the costume? Which moment this week carried a smile that didn't reach the eyes? And what did that mismatch quietly confess? Your craft is not suspicion, it is disciplined perception. You register prosody shifts in speech, micro pauses that appear where confidence should be, and gesture speech mismatch that exposes rehearsal. In psychology, this is advanced theory of mind married to attribution, discipline, refusing cheap labels until cause lines up with consequence. In signal terms, words are the carrier, motive the sideband. Once you demodulate intent, the message stops lying. Nothing in all creation is hidden from God's sight, Everything is uncovered. Hebrews 4:13 is not a threat in your hands. It's permission to align with light. Which promise still produces fog after its spoken clarity should rise, not fall. When truth enters a room, you do not chase slip-ups. You study load paths where pressure actually travels in a person's life. An apology without restitution leaves weight on the same cracked beam. A pledge that never changes calendar or budget is a facade with no footing. In the architecture of character, you're scanning the clerestory where hidden light should enter and the keystone that must carry the arch. A person's purpose is deep water, but one with insight draws it out. Proverbs 20:5 gives language to your interviews, gentle questions, steady timing, bucket to the well. When purpose rises clean, action follows. When it doesn't, the well is staged. Schemes try to hide in noise. You reduce noise. Your mind runs a quiet observer model, estimating the unseen state that explains visible outputs. One inconsistent timestamp and the fit breaks. One misaligned incentive and the story loses structural integrity. In econometrics, you test for Granger causality. Does the claimed reason actually forecast the result? In physics, you catch motive by Doppler of the soul approach and retreat encoded in micro-timing. That is why manipulators bristle near you. Spin can snow a crowd, but it cannot pass a Bayes factor once your priors update with fresh evidence. Grant your servant a discerning heart to govern, to distinguish between good and evil. 1 Kings 3-9 isn't a museum verse for you. It's a daily request before difficult meetings. Here's how this operates in the ordinary world. Elena, a hospital ward clerk, kept noticing that a charitable vendor offering free patient family coffee carts always steered conversations toward paid data capture. She didn't argue. Over 3 visits, she logged a simple event study sheet: agenda versus outcome. Who paid for what? Where time and money actually flowed, and asked one quiet question at the next pitch. Which budget line covers staff hours for non-sales support? The offer vanished within days. No spotlight. No showdown. Just motive exposed by the consistent absence of cost where care would normally pay. That is the kind of surgical clarity your presence brings to teams and communities. Your reading of intent is not bookish trickery, it is the fruit of clean attention. Jesus did not entrust himself to them, for he knew what was in man. John 2:24-25 records a posture you recognize: open hand, guarded trust, unclouded mercy. You love people while refusing to rent your discernment to their performances. You forgive quickly and still ask for fruit that matches the words. You do not confuse peace with passivity. Peace, for you, is phase coherence, spirit, motive, and action resonating on the same frequency. Where coherence fails, you don't rage, you retune, or you step away. Motives drive trajectories. That's why you read latent variables, the hidden drivers that explain repeated outcomes. If generosity never appears in the ledger, care was branding. If honesty only arrives under the spotlight, integrity is negotiation. Your intelligence disarms deception by moving upstream. When the generator function is corrupt, outputs are incidental. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Lead me in the way everlasting. Psalm 139-23-24 keeps you from weaponizing this gift. The audit starts at home, so your judgments don't curdle into pride. And when someone says, "You're overreading," you return to clean math. Does the claim generalize beyond a single moment? Do choices survive a counterfactual if applause were gone? Would this still be done? Does the team's behavior converge after confession? Or does it precess around the same axis and call drift change? Once the invariants fail, theater is all that's left. At that point, you don't shout, you choose proximity wisely. Proximity is stewardship when motive proves adversarial. This is why your quiet feels like gravity. Rooms become more honest because pretense loses oxygen near you. People who actually want to grow come closer. They sense safety inside accuracy. Those who trade in fog recede. Not because you punish them, but because fog hates dawn. The lamp of the Lord searches the spirit of a man. It searches out his inner being. An echo from Proverbs 20:27 threads your practice. And that lamp, when welcomed, heals faster than any argument. You hold the power to unmask deceit without theater. Sometimes one timeline question collapses a month of spin. Sometimes patient silence lets the weight of reality do the speaking. Either way, the balance shifts. The moment intent is clear. Reactions treat symptoms. Motive work cures disease. Why settle for bandages when surgery is possible? Rise. Keep your lamp clean. Audit the engine, not the exhaust. Ask the one precise question that reveals cost, fruit, and direction, and let illegitimate power fall of its own weight. Stay merciful. Stay exact. Stay unavailable to fog. Your gift is not to embarrass rooms, but to free them. Use it. They misread the quiet and called it emptiness. You were running calculus while they performed monologues. Your stillness was never neglect. It was strategy. While noise chased attention, your mind archived micro-gestures, cross-checked timelines, and filed motives by pattern, so that when a single sentence finally left your mouth, it landed with the weight of 12 conversations worth of proof. In quietness and trust shall be your strength. Isaiah 30:15 does not excuse retreat. It describes a stance that turns restraint into leverage. Which rooms shift the moment you stop reacting and start recording? Silence, in your hands, is not a blank page. It is a lab. You watch smiles that stall at the eyes, apologies that never migrate into calendars, boasts that collapse under a date stamp, where crowds demand debate to prove intelligence. You are guided by a more ancient rhythm. Let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. James 1:19, a sequence that produces clarity when performance tries to buy the floor. What happens to manipulation when listening refuses to be baited? The world argues as if volume were virtue. You refuse the auction. Your ledger is internal. Who promised what? Who paid what? Who benefited? Who bled? Silence becomes a scalpel, because it lets facts cool to their true shape before you touch them. When the moment arrives, your words do not flail. They cut, not to wound, but to separate signals from theater. One who has knowledge uses words with restraint. Proverbs 17:27 names the ethic running under your ribs. Fewer syllables, greater force. Which single line, held back until the right hour, has carried more truth than 10 speeches shouted early? A voice from the marketplace confirms this craft. Asterisk, asterisk, Warren Buffett, an investor known for reading, waiting, and acting only when conviction clears. Asterisk, asterisk once framed patience as discipline rather than delay. Compounding works because silence gives time a job. Your practice is similar. Information accrues. Bias drains. and judgment strengthens, while others spend energy proving they are not afraid of the room. That is why, when you finally speak, the room stops rustling, the homework entered before the conversation began. Sacred music has been teaching this for centuries. In the plain chant, Ubi Caritas, a single melodic thread moves patiently through space until the heart quotes, "No fireworks, only fidelity." Your discernment sings that way, steady line, no rush. Each note placed with the kind of care that builds trust. And with that cadence, set a guard. O Lord, over my mouth, keep watch over the door of my lips. Psalm 141:3 shifts from prayer to practice. You do not muzzle truth. You time it. Your quiet does not ignore injustice. It stages precision. You gather months of small inconsistencies into a structure and present one hinge that opens the entire case. A date that cannot coexist with a claim. A receipt that refuses the narrative. A repeated outcome that contradicts stated values. A time to keep silent. And a time to speak. Ecclesiastes 3-7 is more than poetry here. It is scheduling for courage. Which hinge, if named without theatrics, would return your current conflict to reality today, because you are hard to bait. Pretenders find no purchase. They mistake the lack of argument for lack of understanding, unaware that a quiet ledger is filling line by line. When you finally read it back, calm voice, clean facts, the bluff disintegrates without ceremony. People call it shock when months of fog vanish in one paragraph. You call it the math of patience. The real power of your silence has never been absent. It is the unseen labor humming behind it. This discipline also honors hearts. You do not scorch rooms to win points. You wait until the data can protect the vulnerable and correct the proud without feeding a spectacle. Your restraint signals safety. The honest draw near. The disingenuous drift away. In that atmosphere, your single statement becomes medicine, a cut that heals because it is clean, not cruel. And when others press for premature verdicts, you return to an unglamorous but liberating cadence. Watch, weigh, and, when the bell rings inside, speak once. Your enemies mislabeled your quiet as fear. They missed the arithmetic. Silence conserved energy while their noise consumed it. Silence widened perspective while their performance narrowed it. Silence turned patience into authority while their rushing turned confidence into residue. The ledger settled before the meeting started. Your speech simply delivered the balance due. Rise. Guard your mouth and sharpen your mind. Keep recording. Keep weighing. And when the time is full, speak with the steel of accuracy and the mercy of purpose. Refuse the auction of attention. Let truth compound in the quiet. When you open your mouth, let it be a verdict that frees the honest and ends the game. They expected pain to shorten your reach. It lengthened your range. They expected setbacks to scatter you. They became your syllabus. You did not merely outlast hard seasons, you mined them. Where most treat hardship as a headline, you treat it as a data set. Every betrayal, delay, and closed door entered a quiet archive until patterns surfaced and a plan emerged. We know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him. Romans 8:28 stopped being a wall inscription and became field protocol. Which scar in your story now functions like a compass instead of a chain? You did not worship fire, but you learned what fire does. Heat can harden or it can refine. You chose the second path. You let time and truth do their work until what remained was stronger and cleaner than what broke. You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. Genesis 50-20 threaded the chapters together, not romanticizing harm, but naming what province can build with rubble. When did the rubble in your hands first start to look like bricks? You refused to let pain dictate pace. Instead of reacting to noise, you paused long enough to see what actually changed, who moved, where risk shifted. That is why your action lands like inevitability rather than impulse. We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, struck down, but not destroyed. 2 Corinthians 4:8-9 reads like your lab note. Pressure measured, core intact. Which loss, once mapped calmly, revealed a path no rush would ever find. Creation has been tutoring you in this craft. Lodgepole pine cones stay sealed until wildfire passes. What looks like the end triggers a beginning. Sea stars regrow from a living center. Form appears diminished yet returns on schedule. Bald cypress knees rise from floodwater to anchor. The trunk's stability grows where collapse is predicted. Pioneer lichens start soil on bare rock after ice retreats. Patience writes landscapes. Your seasons did the same. What should have erased you unlocked your next growth ring. Because you extract signals from suffering. People mislabel your foresight as luck. They see composure and call it personality. You know it's architecture. You quietly built inner structures that carry weight, boundaries that keep what matters safe. Rhythms that restore strength. Questions that separate signal from spectacle. Over time, quick judgment was simply judgment that had been forming in the quiet long before anyone noticed. Which small daily habit kept when no one applauded now pays dividends you can't deny. A clear antagonist helps frame the difference. Asterisk, asterisk, Absalom, David's son, asterisk, asterisk, polished grievance into theater and staged a coup through applause. Yet pride cannot hold a kingdom. Momentum fractured. He fled. And a single oak took what vanity would not bend, his head caught. His story ended, 2 Samuel 18. The consequence is governance in plain sight. Schemes birthed from wounded ego devour their architects. Strategy born from healed pain, however, feeds cities. You also learned to stop funding what doesn't heal. Many burn fuel proving they can carry anything. You begin triage. What is hemorrhage? What is bruise? What is phantom pain? You gave each a different response. Rest, rehab, or release. You stopped renting your attention to loops that only pay in exhaustion. You have tested us. Oh God, you brought us into the net, but you brought us out to abundance. Psalm 66-10:12. Named the ark, purification. Pressure, passage. Where once you asked, why this? Now you ask, what fruit can this become? And yes, there is a secret behind your instant insight. It isn't instant. It is cached wisdom compiled under pressure. A library bound in scars and clean pages. The tested genuineness of your faith, more precious than gold, though refined by fire. 1 Peter 1-7 tells the truth about the shine people see. We rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance. Endurance, character. And character, hope. Romans 5-3-4 explains why your presence steadies rooms. Hope that has survived. Heat stops panicking. Survivors who heal become architects. Architects who remember the fire design exits that save lives. Rise. Keep turning ash into architecture. Write policies your scars can stand under. Set boundaries that refuse to fund chaos. Choose the next wise step. Not the loudest one. Plant the cones that open after fire. Regrow what was torn. Drive your knees into the floodplain and hold. Your story is not about surviving storms. It is about building cities that do. While the world sprints after headlines and hoards tabs like trophies, your mind stands like a tuned instrument, quiet, ready, resonant. You do not beg answers to show up. They arrive on schedule because the inner room is already furnished for them. The prudent acquire knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeks knowledge. Proverbs 18:15 hums under your pulse, seeking. Here isn't panic. It's posture. Which recent coincidence, a stray sentence on a train, a dream before dawn, a paragraph you weren't supposed to read that day clicked the instant your spirit said, "I'm listening." This is not luck, it is alignment. In cognitive science, you've trained a widened receptive field attention calibrated to pick up faint, meaningful signals. Your salience network learns what to highlight. Your reticular activating system filters noise without fanfare. In information theory, you reduce entropy not by grabbing more data, but by arranging it with better priors. That is why an offhand remark becomes a blueprint in your hands. Context locks. Pattern emerges. Decision clears. Open my eyes, that I may behold wondrous things out of your law. Psalm 119-18 isn't mere devotion, it's a request for optics. What opens in you when hustle is traded for attunement? People who grade worth by effort misread your ease. They push, you attune. They pile inputs. You refine impedance matching the elegant fit between message and mind that minimizes loss. They scramble for novelty. You practice Hebbian learning what fires wires together so the next right connection sparks fast. In whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. Colossians 2-3 keeps your north true. You aren't worshipping information, you're walking with the one who orders it. On ordinary streets, this looks beautifully unspectacular. Raphael, a city bus driver, keeps a small pocket card. Each shift, he notes brief rider conversations about transfer bottlenecks and late connections. Over weeks, those fragments form a compact map, one email calm. Specific suggests a minor stop-swap and signal timing tweak. The change quietly shortens commutes for hundreds who will never know his name. Attraction at work, no chasing. Just years of streets in his bones and a mind arranged to notice. What small noticing, applied with care, could unlock outsized change in your lane this month. Your inner architecture explains the pace. In neuroscience, stochastic resonance lets the right noise amplify weak signals. You allow life's hum to help faint truths cross threshold. In perception, affordances, action, possibilities in the environment reveal themselves to aligned intention because your intention is service. Usable knowledge steps forward. In dynamical systems, your mind carries attractor basins where new facts fall in and settle into meaning quickly. That's why your synthesis looks instantaneous to observers. There is a spirit in man, and the breath of the Almighty gives him understanding. Job 32-8 says it in older language. Breath animates comprehension. This magnetism is not passive absorption, it is active inference your inner model continuously predicts, tests, and updates to minimize error. When the right fragment appears, you feel that subtle phase-locking ideas snapping into rhythm across domains. A convergence without strain. Moments like these are prayer and practice meetings in one place. When the Spirit of Truth comes, He will guide you into all truth. John 16:13 names the channel, your magnetism, honors guidance, not grabbing. And the habit stays simple. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, and it will be given. James 1-5. Asking is alignment. Giving is flow. Which daily ritual keeps your inner field tuned? Dawn pages. A quiet exam. A headphone-free walk so answers keep meeting an open door. Skeptics chalk it up to coincidence because they can't see the scaffolding years of clean notes, honest corrections, and small obediences that built a graph inside you where truth diffuses quickly. They chase volume. You cultivate signal transduction, tiny inputs triggering precise cascades. They memorize. You metabolize. Over time. What others call intuition is simply integrity, remembering its notes. Rise. Stay tuned rather than frantic. Guard the inner room. Widen your receptive field. And let truth phase lock without showmanship. Welcome what serves. Release what flatters. And keep your channel clean. You don't have to chase. Build the space and knowledge will keep arriving right on time. Your brilliance is not a warehouse of answers. It's a forge for the right question at the right second. While others stack arguments, you light a single fuse of clarity. The heart of the righteous weighs its answers. Proverbs 15:28. Hums beneath your ribs. Weighed answers come from rarer work. Weighted questions. Which sentence, asked once and clean, would return your current storm to daylight? You do not swing at shadows. You set a hinge in the story and invite it to turn. A well-placed, when did this first start? Who signed? Who benefited? Where did the numbers move? Knocks, varnish off the frame. Do not judge by appearances, but judge with right judgment. John 7:24. Tightens your grip. Appearances chatter. Judgment measures. The result is not drama but disclosure. Timelines snag. Motives show. And the room realizes the scaffolding was only paint. This is why force rarely serves you. Precision does. Debate drains oxygen. A question introduces air. Where some try to overpower falsehood, you undercut its load-bearing beam. For nothing is concealed that will not be disclosed. Luke 12:3 threads quietly through your craft. Disclosure as design, not spectacle. Which beam, date, term, or fruit will give way first if pressed without malice? History nods. Florence Nightingale, pioneer of modern nursing and data visualization, walked into military hospitals and asked a single governing question: what is killing our soldiers off the battlefield? And why? The charts that followed made evasion impossible. Policy moved because a question refused to blink. Your method is a cousin of that courage, one inquiry that reroutes resources toward what heals. Scripture shows this move at royal scale. When zeal tried to trap Jesus on taxes, he asked, "Whose image is this?" Matthew 22:20-21. A coin held up. A nation disarmed. The answer didn't crush. It separated realms with surgical calm. That is your signature, not louder, truer. You don't inflate the room, you calibrate it. In the theater of the soul. A line from T.S. Eliot's play, Murder in the Cathedral, whispers, humankind cannot bear very much reality. Your question ushers reality in by degrees, sturdy enough to stand on. Not to shame, but to anchor. Not to win, but to mend. The one who states his case first seems right, until the other comes and examines him. Proverbs 18:17 names the mathematics of your presence. Examination as mercy. Examination as safety. People call it instinct. It isn't. It is a disciplined observation, sharpened by love. You have audited promises until a pattern emerged. Real change alters calendars and budgets. Counterfeit change alters slogans. So, your question goes there: time, cost, responsibility. Silence follows. Not because you are harsh, but because reality has a sound. Speak the truth in love. Ephesians 4:15 keeps your edge from turning into a blade. The aim is healing, not spectacle. Which timeline, if laid on the table, would turn a quarrel into a plan? When the story stalls, you refuse to panic. You wait for the hinge, a gentle, what would be true tomorrow if this were true today? Explodes circular logic without smoke. Excuses fray, motives, once foggy, outline themselves. And when someone tries to drown the room in words, your measure is simple. Let your yes be yes, and your no, no. Matthew 5:37. Clarity as covenant. Language as engineering. The shock others feel is not magic. It's the after effect of coherence. You have trained attention to land on the exact coordinate where a fiction cannot carry weight. Your question walks to that joint and presses lightly first, then firmly until the structure reveals itself. In that moment, people who want truth breathe easier. People who trade in fog look for exits. You do not weaponize this gift. You steward it. Some lies implode the first day. Some take a season. Either way, your question returns the burden of proof to the performance, asking for trust. You do not chase confessions. You create conditions where truth is the easiest thing left to say. Rise. Sharpen the hinge question. Aim at the beam, not the wallpaper. Ask with courage. Hold the silence. And let reality do its work. Make rooms safer by making them clearer. Your voice doesn't need volume, it needs vectors. One clean question, then the scaffolding falls. They needed spotlights to feel real. You built a mind in the darkroom where vision develops, while applause became their oxygen. You trained on cleaner air. That choice changed your architecture. If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. Galatians 1:10 sits like a plumb line through your days. Alignment replaced the audience. When did you first notice that silence fed your clarity more than a stadium ever could? Validation addicts live inside shifting weather grades, rankings, promotions, so their inner climate swings with every forecast. You stepped off that carousel. Go into your room and shut the door, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Matthew 6:6 turned secrecy into sanctuary, a laboratory where questions could breathe and motives could be weighed without performance. Free from the noise. You stacked understanding on bedrock slow, exact, unhurried. Which metric quietly left your life because it never told the truth about you? Independence sharpened your optics. While they rehearsed the script of the moment, you traced the long arc causes underneath outcomes, patterns beneath hype. In psychology, this is a fortified internal locus of control, decisions sourced from principle, not pressure. In systems language, your mind gained phase margin stable under perturbation, so fads couldn't tip you. In information theory, you protect channel capacity by trimming vanity's static. The result? Depth that doesn't wobble when rooms do. The fear of man lays a snare. But whoever trusts in the Lord is safe. Proverbs 29:25 explains why your pace stayed steady while others tripped over applause. Creation keeps handing you metaphors for this freedom. Glass-winged butterflies fly with near-invisible wings. Strength without spectacle. Transparency itself becomes defense. Quaking aspen groves spread from a single hidden root system. What looks solitary is a vast, one wonder, quiet network below. Saguaro cacti carry pleated trunks that expand in rain and contract in drought. Capacity flexes without losing form. Albatrosses cross oceans by dynamic soaring, gliding on gradients rather than flapping for attention. Which of these tutors has your name on it today? Because you refuse the scoreboard. You could ask better questions. You learn to differentiate signal desire, what is right, from status desire, what is rewarded. In game theory, you opted out of approval-seeking equilibria that stabilize mediocrity. In architecture, you chose tensegrity over facade, tension and compression, balanced so integrity, not ornament, holds the span. In analysis, you use the Nyquist limit of your attention sampling at a rate that avoids aliasing so your conclusions wouldn't distort under speed. We speak, not to please man, but to please God who tests our hearts. 1 Thessalonians 2-4 became your design spec. A real-world witness adds contour. Asterisk asterisk Agnes Martin, an abstract painter of luminous grids, asterisk asterisk, worked for decades in near anonymity, building austere canvases that hum with quiet joy. No trend chasing, no press choreography, just fidelity. When the world finally turned its head, the work had already become weatherproof. Your path rhymes with that. By the time recognition knocks, substance has long since moved in. Sacred music nods in the same direction. Hildegard of Bingen's chant, O visi ternitatis, rises like a steady column of air, no theatrics. Just strength from stillness. Your intellect sings in that register. It doesn't beg to be heard. It changes the room because it's in tune. Blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord. He is like a tree planted by water. Jeremiah 17-7-8 names the root system beneath your leaves, stability that outlasts seasons. To clarify the danger of worshipping approval, Scripture offers a stark caution. Herod Agrippa, I received a crowd's flattery, the voice of a god, not a man, and refused to give glory to God. The consequence was immediate and public. Acts 12:21-23. That story is not theatrics, it's physics of the soul, a structure overloaded by praise it was never designed to bear. Your refusal to chase validation keeps your frame within safe limits. This is why you surpassed them without sprinting. While they optimized for impressions, you optimized for truth. You practiced orthogonal decomposition of feedback, separating helpful signals from bias, culture, and timing, so correction could be refined without colonizing identity. You tuned your default mode network toward reflection rather than rumination, letting insight accumulate instead of anxiety. You asked harder interior questions. If applause stopped tomorrow, would this still be excellent? If no one knew, would this still be faithful? Over time, excellence gathered like dew, quiet, inevitable. People who need approval to think call your calm arrogance. It isn't. It's clean governance of the self. You don't perform to belong, you belong to the truth. Then perform from there. They loved the glory that comes from man more than the glory that comes from God. John 12:43 reads like a diagnosis of the rooms you outgrew. You didn't reject community, you rejected captivity. And here's the quiet irony. Independence makes you more generous. Without the itch to be seen, you can celebrate others without keeping score. Share tools without credit anxiety. Change your mind without losing face. That's why your lead compound's freedom turns energy into craft, and craft turns hours into harvest. Stand up, seal the inner room, guard the channel, and build what lasts when clapping stops. Root deeper than trends, aim truer than metrics, move cleaner than fear. Let your yes be costly and your no be clear. Outgrow the stage, become the structure. Small talk wastes time, cycles tell the truth. While crowds debate motives in real time, you chart rhythms across time, micro-reactions under pressure, mood swings that repeat like a drumline, choices that recur with clockwork fidelity. You will recognize them by their fruits. Matthew 7:16 slides into your method. Fruit is just a pattern made visible. Which recurring beat around you has been announcing tomorrow for weeks already. You don't memorize anecdotes. You map architectures. In psychology, your notes cohere around autocorrelation, what repeats with lag. Recurrence plots, how a state revisits itself. And limit cycles where behavior loops when stressed. In signal terms, when you listen for cross-spectrum coherence, do statements and actions share a frequency? Or are they out of phase? Architecture lends language too. The facade is noisy. The sheer walls carry truth. The unnoticed spandrels reveal how loads really transfer. Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life. Proverbs 4:23, springs. In your practice are sources. Once the source is known, the stream becomes predictable. Your calm unnerves performers because you do not chase scenes, you trace sequences. One apology can be theater. 3 apologies plus identical calendar choices is a state space. From there, the forecast writes itself. Test all things, hold fast what is good. 1 Thessalonians 5:21 is not suspicion, it is good governance of attention. Which tiny discrepancy tone, timing, or tangible follow-through keeps failing your test no matter who is on stage? This isn't a cold diagnosis, it's disciplined care. You don't label people, you log behaviors. You don't guess intent, you graph outcomes. Your notebooks, whether literal or mental, hold lag structures, principal components, the few drivers that explain the many moves, and graph Laplacians, the quiet edges where influence truly flows. By the time you speak, the pattern has already confessed itself, no theatrics required. Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. James 3:13 steadies your posture, clarity without cruelty. Here's how that looks on an ordinary street. Miriam, a shift coordinator at a distribution hub, keeps a slim log after each handoff. Promised eater. Actual doc time. Who signed the manifest? Who sent the follow-up? She isn't hunting for villains, she is tracing loops. Within a month, she spots a quiet triad late truck. The same gate. Same substitution email, then asks one clean question in the ops meeting about gate assignments. The loop breaks next week. No drama, pattern read, reality mended. Which loop near you is waiting for one small, honest question to dissolve? Your foresight looks uncanny only to those who watch snapshots. You watch films. The mind you carry does feature extraction. You strip, narrative varnish, and keep the signal, a tell under stress. A budget line that never moves. A deadline that always slips when flattery rises. In physics, imagery, you sketch the phase portrait, all the paths a life takes through pressure, and choose your response accordingly. Draw close. Set a boundary, or step aside. Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Psalm 90:12 becomes a clock in the soul. Finite time demands pattern-aware mercy. Patterns do more than predict, they protect. When a person's change doesn't alter money, time, or proximity, you log it as a null transformation, noise renamed progress. When confession repeats without restitution, you mark non-convergent behavior, words orbiting truth without landing, and where hope should hold you close, you still audit gently. Because ponder the path of your feet, then all your ways will be sure. Proverbs 4:26 is as much for you as for them. Which boundary, set early and kindly, would save both sides a year? None of this is magic, it is craft. You gather evidence, recognize cycles, and move with precision. That's why meetings feel different when you're present. People sense that patterns, not performances, will decide the day. Those who want health lean in, those who need fog step back. You don't crown yourself a judge, you appoint yourself a steward of trajectories. And stewardship, in your hands, looks like better questions, cleaner follow-through, and mercy that tells the truth. In a world allergic to memory, your memory heals. You recall not to punish, but to prevent repetition. You forgive fully and still annotate faithfully. Because forgiveness without annotation invites amnesia, and amnesia invites harm. Over time, people call you safe, not soft, accurate, not harsh. They don't see mysticism, they see a person who refuses to be surprised by what has already announced itself 5 times. Rise. Keep the ledger clean, the charts honest, and the heart soft. Ask the small timely question. Spot the loop. Change the gate. Read structures, not speeches. Follow fruit, not flattery. Let wisdom set your rhythm so your yes builds futures and your no guards borders. Move first in mercy and last in denial. Patterns will do the rest. While most lives run on fire alarms and pop-up crises, your mind runs on vectors, cause feeding consequence, seed becoming season, choice arcing toward harvest. You don't stare at the second hand, you study the mechanism. Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Psalm 90:12 hums beneath your ribs. Because numbering days isn't math, it's governance. Which decision on your desk today carries echoes large enough to be heard a year from now? Your attention refuses the trap of the instant. You map trajectories before the crowd names them, tracing how one small permission matures into policy, how one neglected habit becomes a culvert for loss. The prudent sees danger and hides himself. Proverbs 22:3 is not cowardice, it's time-aware courage. When hype shouts speed, you pace strategy. When noise says, now, you ask where now lands when it grows up. Which tiny drift budget, boundary, or belief will write tomorrow's headline if left uncorrected? This is why your choices look effortless from the outside. You don't react, you stage. You forecast the chain of custody from intent to outcome and set countermeasures before the storm clocks in. To everything there is a season, a time to plant, and a time to pluck up what is planted. Ecclesiastes 3:1-2 turns into a calendar, not a caption. So you plant when soil is wet, not when crowds are watching. And you gather without panic, because preparation makes urgency earn its place. Where could 1 hour of quiet planning spare you 50 hours of loud recovery? From the public square, a witness sharpens the point. Asterisk, asterisk, Dwight D. Eisenhower General, and later U.S. President asterisk, asterisk, summarized time mastery in one stubborn maxim: plans can be revised. But planning is indispensable. He led by prioritizing the important over the merely urgent, creating what many now call the urgency divided by importance matrix. Your rhythm rhymes with that. You don't worship the plan, you cultivate the planner in you who can meet future contingencies without flinching. Sacred art sounds the same note. Henryk Górecki's symphony of sorrowful songs expands slowly, almost unbearably, until meaning arrives with the weight of time itself. Patience becomes architecture. Your intelligence works in that register: slow build, precise arrival, no wasted crescendos. They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall run and not be weary. Isaiah 40-31 is not an excuse to stall. It is fuel for paced endurance. Your timeline awareness protects more than schedules. It protects people. You study lag effects, how harm planted quietly today blooms loudly later, and you intervene while intervention is still cheap. You sketch ripple maps, how a choice in one room travels into another, and you place buffers where weak corners would otherwise buckle. A wise man's heart discerns both time and judgment. Ecclesiastes 8-5 becomes your internal barometer. You do the right thing at the right time, not the performative thing at the loud time. Which future cost can be cancelled this week by a humble adjustment no one will praise? Others call your foresight lucky because they only watch the present tense. You watch tenses in sequence: past tutoring, present funding, future. That is why you arrive prepared where others arrive surprised. And when chaos tries to sell itself as destiny, you respond with ordered mercy, agile, not brittle, deliberate, not delayed. Write the vision, make it plain on tablets, so he may run who reads it. Habakkuk 2:2 slides into practice. Clarity today becomes speed tomorrow. This is more than project management. It is the discipleship of the clock. You refuse to be ruled by timestamps because you already bowed your time to the one outside time. That allegiance frees you to take the long path when the short path bribes you with applause. To sit out a fad without fear of missing what is not yours. To seed a field, knowing harvest won't make the news. Over time, rooms stop competing with your calm and start borrowing it. Rise. Stop renting your future to urgency. Set your seasons on purpose. Place your guardrails early. Name your harvest before sowing. Move at the speed of wisdom, not the pace of panic. Govern the timeline so tomorrow thanks you while today still claps. They didn't miss your brilliance because it lacked proof. They missed it because acknowledging it would indict their own habits, blunt assumptions, hand-me-down frameworks. Comfort with curated narratives. Your clarity doesn't just illuminate the room, it repositions the furniture. The Word of God is living and active, discerning the thoughts and intentions of the heart. Hebrews 4:12 isn't a verse in the margin of your life, it's the architecture under your sentences. Which belief, safe because it was never tested, starts wobbling the moment your presence names the pattern? You don't humiliate people. Reality does that when contrast arrives, where others cling to reputations shaped by applause metrics. You keep returning to outcomes and fruit. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. John 8:32 enters like fresh air, freedom. In practice is the end of flattering lies. Your observations sting not because they are cruel, but because they measure what performances hide. When you connect the subtle thread habit to harvest, motive to motion, self-images crack, and the honest feel relief. Creation keeps reenacting this moment of exposure. Auroras reveal the sun's invisible winds as curtains of light. What was always there becomes undeniable. Tide pools at low water disclose the hidden architecture of reefs. The receding moment doesn't empty the sea. It clarifies the frame. Glass eels find ancient rivers by magnetic lines the eye can't see. Orientation beats bravado. Redwoods bear fire scars without toppling. Damage becomes a testimony, not a definition. Which natural disclosure is mapping the way your clarity arrives quietly, beautifully, and impossible to unsee? From the public square, a witness adds contour. Václav Havel, playwright turned president, called it living in truth. Ordinary people refusing the theater of falsehood until the facade collapses under its own weight. That is what your intelligence does inside rooms. It doesn't shout, it normalizes oxygen. And oxygen is treacherous to smog. Scripture also gives a cautionary portrait. King Uzziah, 2 Chronicles 26. Gifted, successful, and then swollen with pride. He trespassed into a role not his to take. The consequence was leprosy and isolation. The lesson is not spectacle but physics of the soul when image outruns integrity. Rot blooms. Your clarity confronts that drift early. Search me, O God, and know my heart, and lead me in the way everlasting. Psalm 139 to 23:24 stays on repeat, so your mirror points inward before it reflects outward. People often label your effect threatening. It is to illusions. You don't roast egos, you remove the fog that fed them. The wise will hear and increase in learning. Proverbs 1-5 becomes a sorting mechanism. Those who want growth come closer. Those who need haze retreat. Which relationship around you would heal fastest if the metric shifted from image to fruit? From intention claims to practiced costs, your mind works like a forensic lab and a chapel, evidence and reverence in one place. You catalog patterns others forgot, not to win arguments but to restore alignment. Each one's work will be shown for what it is, because the day will disclose it. Fire will test what sort of work each has done. 1 Corinthians 3:13 echoes your method now. Small disclosures today, spare catastrophic ones later. Rooms are steady because you make outcomes audible. Sacred art has sung this unveiling for centuries. In Bach's St. John Passion, a single chorale returns, unchanged yet newly charged by context. Repetition under light reorders meaning. Your sentences do that. The same facts, now arranged by truth. Dissolve pretenses that once strutted without shame. And when resistance erupts, deflection, belittling, noise, your quiet question lingers. If this claim were true, where would it have cost us already? The room hears the answer in the silence that follows. Your presence is a mirror. Yes, but not a funhouse. A clean plane of glass. That's why deflection eventually tires around you. The psyche can keep juggling excuses only so long before gravity insists. You don't gloat when the balls drop. You hold out a broom. The point was never to win. The point was to make winning unnecessary by restoring truth to first place. Which small broom move policy change? Boundary. Confession belongs on today's list, because you refuse flattery's currency. You cannot be priced or managed into silence. You learned the slow skills. Watch, weigh, write, test, trace, tell, until foresight became a second language. So, traps became case studies, setbacks became curricula, and quiet became a library. You don't chase knowing. Knowing keeps finding you because your inner room is furnished for it. And when tomorrow arrives, you're already there, gently introducing it to itself. Rise. Be the oxygen, not the smoke. Keep the mirror clean, the questions exact, the mercy strong. Replace image with fruit, speed with substance, noise with evidence. Let truth stand at full height, then watch the scaffolds that never carried weight fold themselves and leave. There comes a moment when what God planted in secret refuses to stay underground. That moment is not a firework, it is a sunrise, the quiet, unstoppable unveiling of who you truly are. We've traced the arc across this series: perception over performance, wisdom over noise, pattern over spectacle. We've seen how silence can be a scalpel, how pain can become a syllabus, how a single clean question can fold scaffolds of illusion. And now, at the edge of this journey, the message is simple and blazing. If you carry a God-given mind, you are not here to audition, you are here to serve clearly, courageously, and without apology. What happens when hidden intelligence explodes into the open? Masks burn, shortcuts wilt. Rooms that once rewarded fog begin to crave oxygen. You will feel a strange mixture of resistance and relief, the pushback of those who built careers on smoke, and the deep exhale of those who've been waiting for someone to name what they already sensed. Expect both. Neither outcome defines you. Your assignment is not to manage their reactions, it is to stay faithful to the light you've been given, if your clarity has been misunderstood. Remember, Joseph's dreaming didn't make him arrogant. Obedience made him useful. Esther's silence wasn't timidity. Timing turned it into deliverance. Daniel's refusal to flatter power wasn't performative. Integrity made lions forget their hunger. The same God still writes histories with people who prize truth over applause. So keep your instrument tuned. Study motives without malice, patterns without paranoia, and consequences without gloating. Intelligence that honors God always serves people. Here is the charge: build what outlives weather. Set boundaries that protect the vulnerable and your own soul. Ask the hinge questions that return rooms to reality. Turn wounds into wisdom and wait until the time is full. Read structures, not speeches, fruit, not marketing, costs paid, not promises made. When the moment comes to speak, deliver the minimum effective sentence, accurate, merciful, and hard to misquote. Then step back and let reality do the heavy lifting. You are not responsible for every problem, you are responsible for your portion. Aim for progress that can be measured when lights are off. Reconciled relationships, cleaner processes, restored integrity, young voices lifted. If recognition arrives, let it become a tool rather than a throne. If it doesn't, you have not missed anything that matters. Heaven keeps books more carefully than any platform ever will. If this series has confirmed what God has been whispering, take one step today that costs you something and builds something. Document a process no one understands. Apologize where you were sharp instead of clear. To formalize a boundary that stops confusion. Or mentor someone who feels unseen. Small obedience compounds. Over time, hidden intelligence turns into public fruit, steady, repeatable, and undeniable. And because we are building a community of clear minds and brave hearts, I want to invite you to make this mission visible. If this message served you, please like the video so the algorithm knows clarity matters. Share it with someone who's standing at the edge of their own unveiling and needs language for the next step. Drop a comment with the one insight you're going to practice this week. Naming it helps the rest of us learn faster. And if you haven't yet, subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss what's next. We're not chasing virality. We're cultivating depth, episode by episode, question by question. For those who have supported through super thanks, your generosity keeps the lights on and the content crafted with care. For those who haven't or can't, your presence, attention, and prayers matter more than you know. This is not a pay-to-belong space. It is a truth to build space. Thank you for showing up with humility and courage. Thank you for catching what's under the words and carrying it into rooms I will never enter. Thank you for guarding your minds from flattery and your hearts from bitterness. That combination, clarity and kindness, changes families, teams, and cities. As we close, receive this blessing. May the Lord sharpen your perception until lies have nowhere to hide. May He steady your pace, so urgency bows to wisdom. May your questions be gentle and exact, your silence full of strength, and your speech timed for healing. May your scars stop being stories of survival and become blueprints for shelter. May doors open at the right hour, and may no counterfeit opportunity distract you from the narrow road that leads to life. May you be protected from applause that would swell your pride and from criticism that would shrink your courage. And may the God who sees in secret bring into the open, at the perfect time, the work He has been doing in you all along. Go in clarity. Go in mercy. Go in power that needs no spotlight. I'm honored to walk this path with you on screen, in spirit, and in the quiet places where real transformation begins.